What began with early experiments in Imperial Russia evolved into the most powerful armored force on Earth, and continues today in modern Russia. This is every Soviet and Russian tank ever built from the First World War to today's machines. Imperial Russia World War I. Vezdakhod, meaning go anywhere, this bizarre 1915 design was one of Russia's first attempts at an all-terrain fighting vehicle. It utilized a single wide rubber track running the entire length with two small wheels for steering. Though visionary for its time, it never moved past the experimental stage. Tsar tank. Looking more like a giant tricycle than a tank, this 1915 monster featured massive front wheels nearly 9 meters high, designed to crush trenches and obstacles. It was powered by two aircraft engines driving the enormous wheels. Ironically, its small rear wheel got stuck in soft ground during the first test, and the machine never moved again. Rybinsk tank. The prototype armored vehicle developed in 1915 featuring tracks and armor plating. Limited documentation exists, but it represented early Russian attempts at creating indigenous armored fighting vehicles before the revolution. Gulkovich tracked vehicle. An experimental 1916 design attempting to create a combat-capable tracked vehicle. Like most Imperial Russian tank projects, it never reached production before the empire collapsed. Moving on to interwar period. Ruski Renault. This was the first tank ever produced in Soviet Russia, starting in 1920. A direct copy of the French Renault FT captured during the intervention, it proved the young Bolshevik nation possessed industrial capability to manufacture complex armored vehicles. Production reached several hundred units. T-18 milliseconds. 1. The first entirely Soviet-designed tank entering production in 1928. This small light tank displaced 5.5 tons and carried a 37 gun and a rotating turret. Though crude by later standards, it was the grandfather of the Soviet Armored Corps, serving as the primary training platform for early tank crews. T-12. The Soviet Union's first attempt at a medium tank design in 1927. Weighing 19 tons with a 45 gun, it suffered chronic mechanical failures during testing. Only a single prototype was completed before the project was abandoned. T-24. The 1930 follow-up to the failed T-12 featuring improved reliability and a dual turret layout with 45 main gun and machine gun turret. Despite corrections to earlier problems, only 25 were built before production shifted to more successful designs. It served primarily as a training vehicle. T-27 Tankette. A tiny two-man vehicle based on the British Carden Loyd Tankette entering service in 1931. Displacing only 2.7 tons, it lacked a rotating turret and was famously cramped with crew sitting side by side. Despite limitations, over 3,300 were built, making it numerous in early Red Army formations. T-26. This light tank became the true backbone of Soviet armor throughout the 1930s, with over 11,000 produced. Based on the British Vickers 6-ton design, it mounted a 45 gun and weighed 10 tons. It saw heavy combat in Spain, Mongolia, and Finland, proving versatile and reliable in diverse conditions. BT-2. Built for blistering speed, this 1932 fast tank was the first of the revolutionary BT series. It utilized the American Christie suspension, allowing it to drive on tracks or shed them to operate on wheels alone, reaching 72 kilometers per hour on roads. It carried a 37 gun and represented a radical departure from slow infantry tanks. BT-5. A lethal evolution of the fast tank concept entering service in 1933. It featured an enlarged turret from the T-26 mounting a powerful 45 gun while retaining the high-speed Christie suspension. For its era, it was a dangerous predator capable of outrunning and outgunning almost any other light tank on Earth. T-37A. The world's first mass-produced amphibious tank entering service in 1933. Equipped with a small propeller and rudder, it could navigate rivers and lakes at 6 kilometers per hour in water. Over 1,900 were built, giving Soviet reconnaissance massive advantages in the marshy terrain of Eastern Europe. T-2 Zao. Multi-turreted medium tank designed to punch through enemy defensive lines, entering service in 1933. While its 3 turrets provided impressive firepower in multiple directions, with a 76 main gun and 2 machine gun turrets, the complex layout proved a nightmare for commanders to coordinate in battle. 503 were produced. T-35. The ultimate land battleship featuring 5 independent turrets on a single chassis. This 1933 design displaced 50 tons and carried a 76 guns, 2 45 guns, and 6 machine guns operated by an one-man crew. It was a massive propaganda icon showcasing Soviet industrial power, but in combat it proved far too slow and mechanically fragile for modern warfare. T-29. An experimental 1934 attempt to marry the heavy firepower of the T-28 medium tank with the Christie high-speed suspension. It aimed to create a universal tank that was both powerful and fast, reaching 70 kilometers per hour. The design proved too complex for mass production and was abandoned after prototype testing. BT-7. The final and most refined version of the fast tank series entering production in 1935. It featured sloped armor ahead of its time and a high-performance engine making it a crew favorite. Over 5,300 were built and it remained a frontline weapon well into the early years of the Great Patriotic War. T-38, an improved amphibious scout entering service in 1936, designed to be wider and more stable in water than the T-37A. Although its armor remained paper-thin at 9 mm maximum, it was an indispensable tool for crossing water obstacles and conducting silent reconnaissance behind enemy lines. 1,340 were produced. T-46, an ambitious 1936 project meant to replace the aging T-26 light tank fleet. It attempted to combine Christie high-speed suspension with traditional light tank armament in a convertible track wheel design. Unfortunately, the complex dual-drive system was deemed too expensive and only 4 prototypes were completed. BT-7M, the ultimate evolution of the BT series in 1938, featuring a powerful diesel engine replacing earlier gasoline power plants. This provided better fuel efficiency, reduced fire risk, and improved range. It served as a direct ancestor to the legendary T-34 design, SMK, a giant 1939 heavy tank, featuring 2 turrets stacked at different heights with a 76 mm gun in the upper turret and 45 mm in the lower. Weighing 55 tons, it was built to replace the aging T-35. However, combat testing during the Winter War against Finland proved that single turret designs were far more efficient and less cumbersome. T-100, a twin-turreted rival to the SMK heavy tank weighing 58 tons. Like its competitor, it carried both 76 mm and 45 mm guns in separate turrets. Combat experience in Finland demonstrated these multi-turret monsters were too heavy, too tall, and too difficult to manage, leading to cancellation after only 2 prototypes. T-46. 5. The 1938 light tank prototype attempting to improve on the failed T-46 design. It featured better armor and refined suspension but shared the fundamental complexity issues that doomed its predecessor. Only a single prototype was constructed. The next one, World War II, T-40, the final amphibious light tank developed before the German invasion in 1941. Better protected and more seaworthy than earlier scouts, it mounted a 12.7 mm heavy machine gun in a small turret. Most were pressed into service as regular land tanks during the desperate defense of 1941, rather than their intended reconnaissance role. KV-1, a legendary heavy tank that was virtually invincible when it first appeared in 1939. Weighing 47 tons with armor up to 90 mm thick, its steel plating could shrug off almost every anti-tank gun the Germans possessed in 1941. It became a terrifying symbol of Soviet defiance, with single tanks reportedly holding off entire German divisions. T-34 Model 1940, arguably the most influential tank in history, combining revolutionary sloped armor with a high-velocity 76 mm gun and wide tracks for superior mobility. This perfect balance of firepower, protection, and mobility forced every nation to rethink their approach to tank design. Over 84,000 would eventually be produced in all variants. T-60, a small economical scout tank born of desperation in 1941. Designed to use civilian truck engines and automotive components to maintain production, while major factories evacuated east, it displaced only 6.4 tons and carried a 20 mm automatic cannon. Over 6,000 were built, playing a crucial role during the darkest days of the war. KV-2, a terrifying sight on the battlefield defined by its massive boxy turret in 1940. It carried a giant 152 mm howitzer designed to pulverize concrete bunkers and fortifications. A slow-moving behemoth at 52 tons, it could destroy virtually any target with a single blast, but proved too specialized for general combat. T-30, a 1941 simplified non-amphibious version of the T-40 scout tank. By removing expensive swimming equipment, factories could build them faster during the wartime emergency. It served as a vital light support vehicle during the defense of Moscow before production shifted to other models. T-50, a highly advanced light tank that was truly ahead of its time, entering service in 1941. It featured excellent sloped armor up to 37 mm thick and a 3-man turret with a 45 mm gun. While arguably the best light tank of the war, it cost nearly as much as a T-34 to build, limiting production to only 65 units. T-34 Model 1941, the improved variant featuring a longer 76 mm gun and refined turret design. This became the standard production model as factories evacuated east, with simplified construction allowing faster production under wartime conditions. KV-1S, the 1942 lightened variant of the KV-1, reducing weight to 42.5 tons for improved mobility. Thinner armor and a smaller turret allowed higher speeds reaching 43 km per hour. While less protected, it proved more tactically flexible than the ponderous original. T-70, the most widely used Soviet light tank of the mid-war period, entering production in 1942. Weighing 9.2 tons with a 45 mm gun, it featured improved armor and reliability over earlier scouts. Over 8,200 were built, and it was frequently used for reconnaissance and supporting infantry during the massive offensives of 1943. KV-8, a 1942 heavy flamethrower tank designed for psychological warfare. Cleverly disguised to look like a standard KV-1 with a fake 76mm gun barrel, it actually mounted a flamethrower with 700-liter fuel capacity. It was a horrifying weapon used to incinerate bunkers and entrenched infantry at close range. KV-1 Model 1942. The cast turret variant featuring simplified construction and a more powerful 76mm ZSS 5-gun. Armor remained thick at 75mm on the hull, making it nearly impervious to most German weapons of the period. T3, 4, 5, 7. A specialized tank hunter version fitted with a high-velocity 57mm ZS 4-gun in 1941 and again in 1943. This exterminator could penetrate 140mm of armor at 500 meters, destroying heavy German tanks from distances standard 76mm guns couldn't match. Limited numbers were produced for elite units. KV, an experimental 1942 project to create a universal medium tank by merging heavy tank protection with medium tank mobility. Weighing 36 tons with 60mm sloped armor, it mounted an 85mm gun. While never produced, the research directly influenced the IS heavy tank series. T-80 light tank. Not to be confused with the later Cold War main battle tank, this was the 1943 final evolution of wartime light tanks. It featured a two-man turret finally relieving the commander of gun-loading duties, but only 120 were built before production ceased in favor of concentrating on T-34s. T-43. A proposed 1943 successor to the T-34, focusing on significantly thicker armor up to 90mm. While a solid design with improved protection, military leadership decided that upgrading the existing T-34 with a larger 85mm gun was more efficient for the war effort than retooling for a new model. Su-85, the 1943 self-propelled gun mounting an 85mm gun in a fixed casemate on a T-34 chassis. Though technically not a tank, over 2,000 of these tank destroyers provided crucial firepower against German Tigers and Panthers. T-3, 4, 85, the definitive T-34 variant entering service in 1944 with an 85mm gun, an enlarged three-man turret. This gave the T-34 the firepower to reliably destroy German heavy tanks while maintaining the mobility and protection that made the design legendary. Over 35,000 were produced. Su-100, the 1944 tank destroyer, mounting a powerful 100mm gun on the T-34 chassis. Its sloped armor and devastating gun made it one of the most effective tank destroyers of the war, capable of destroying any German armor from long range. IS-1, the first of the Joseph Stalin heavy tanks built to succeed the aging KV line in 1943. Weighing 44 tons, it featured a newly designed hull with heavily sloped armor and an 85mm gun. Only 130 were produced before the design was immediately superseded by the more powerful IS-2. IS-2, a true heavyweight champion armed with a massive 122mm gun entering service in late 1943. Designed for one purpose, smashing through the thickest concrete fortifications and German heavy armor, it could destroy a Tiger tank with a single hit. It became the ultimate breakthrough weapon of the Soviet drive to Berlin. Su-152, the 1943 heavy assault gun mounting a 152mm howitzer on a KV-1S chassis. Nicknamed Beast Killer by crews, it could destroy any German tank including Tigers and Ferdinands with a single shot, though its fixed casemate limited tactical flexibility. ISU-152, the 1943 heavy assault gun mounting the same 152mm howitzer on the IS tank chassis. Its improved armor and mobility made it superior to the Su-152, and it served into the Cold War as both bunker buster and tank destroyer. ISU-122, the variant mounting a 122mm gun in the same casemate as the ISU-152, better suited for anti-tank warfare with higher muzzle velocity. It could penetrate 160mm of armor at 1,000 meters. IS-3, distinguishable by its iconic pike nose armor layout, entering service in 1945. This heavy tank sent shockwaves through Western observers when it appeared in the Berlin Victory Parade. Its extreme armor angles provided incredible protection against shaped charges, and it looked like a machine from the future, weighing 46 tons. T-44, a revolutionary medium tank that bridged the gap between the T-34 and the Cold War era in 1944. By mounting the engine transversely, designers created a very low compact profile with superior armor. It set the design blueprint for almost every Soviet tank that followed, though only 1,823 were built before war's end. IS-4, an incredibly heavy and thick-skinned beast designed for maximum battlefield survival in 1944. Weighing 60 tons with armor up to 160mm thick, it was almost impossible to destroy. However, it proved too heavy for most bridges and roads, having a brief difficult service life before being relegated to reserves. IS-6, an experimental 1944 heavy tank testing a cutting-edge electric transmission system. It featured a sleek, highly sloped hull for maximum protection and diesel-electric drive. However, the complex transmission proved unreliable and the project was abandoned for more conventional designs after two prototypes. T-14 100, a 1945 experimental variant testing a 100 gun in a modified turret. This represented attempts to upgrade the T-34 to face new Western tanks, but development of the T-54 made it redundant. Now let's look at early Cold War. T-54 model 1946, the first version of what would become the most produced tank in human history, with over 95,000 built across all variants. Armed with a 100 mmd 10T gun and featuring a distinctive hemispherical turret with up to 200 of armor, it became the standard bearer for Soviet armored might during the early Cold War. IS-7, Object 260, the heaviest and most powerful of all the Stalin tanks developed in 1945 to 1948. Weighing a massive 68 tons, it carried a 130 naval gun capable of destroying any tank on Earth, and was shielded by incredible armor, up to 210 thick. Only 6 were built as it proved simply too heavy for Soviet logistics and engineering capabilities of the era. PT-7-6, the 1952 standard Soviet amphibious tank for decades. Displacing only 14 tons with a 76 gun, it was exceptionally capable in water reaching 10 km/h swimming speed. It saw service in conflicts across the globe, from Vietnam to the Middle East, with its lightweight construction making it perfect for naval infantry landings and rapid river crossings. Object 416, a 1952 bizarre-looking experimental tank with an incredibly low profile at only 1.8 meters tall. To keep the vehicle as short as possible, the entire 3-man crew, including the driver, was located inside the rotating turret. It mounted a 100 gun and was designed to be almost impossible to hit on the battlefield. T-54A, the 1955 improved variant, adding a bore evacuator and stabilized gun, allowing firing on the move. This became the definitive production model with superior fire control over earlier versions. T-54B, the 1957 further improved model with infrared night vision equipment and improved fire control systems. It represented the mature development of the T-54 concept. T-10, originally designated IS-8, this was the final heavy tank to ever enter Soviet service in 1953. Weighing 52 tons with a 122 gun, it was designed to support faster medium tanks in breakthrough operations. Its retirement in the 1960s marked the end of the heavy tank era in favor of universal main battle tanks. Object 100, an advanced 1958 prototype developed during the competition for a new medium tank. It featured a 100 gun, advanced fire control, and innovative suspension. Ultimately, its rival T-62 was chosen for production because it was simpler, more reliable, and easier to mass manufacture. Tu-55, a major 1958 upgrade to the legendary T-54, adding full NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical protection for the crew. It became a global icon serving in over 50 countries and gaining a legendary reputation for extreme reliability and ease of maintenance in harsh conditions. Production exceeded 27,000 units in the Soviet Union alone. Object 430. This 1953 experimental vehicle was the first step toward a revolutionary new generation of armored warfare. It focused on making the tank as small and compact as possible, with a low silhouette and powerful 100 gun. Its radical development led directly to the game-changing T-64. Object 277, a 1957 high-tech heavy tank project, utilizing an incredibly powerful 1,000 horsepower engine and a 130 gun. It was intended to be the ultimate breakthrough machine for the nuclear age, with armor exceeding 250 in places. However, the rising effectiveness of anti-tank guided missiles made heavy tanks obsolete before it entered production. Object 279, one of the most unique tanks ever built anywhere in 1957. Featuring 4 separate tracks and a UFO-shaped hull, it was designed to survive the shockwave of a nuclear blast without flipping over. It could also cross swampy terrain that would immobilize any other vehicle. Only one prototype was built. Object 770, an advanced 1960 heavy tank prototype focusing on crew comfort and handling. It featured a powerful engine and smooth automatic transmission, making it pleasant to operate. It was a very modern design that unfortunately never reached production as the heavy tank concept was abandoned. IS-4M, the 1956 modernized variant of the IS-4 with improved engine and transmission. Despite upgrades, its excessive weight continued limiting its tactical usefulness. T-54M, the modernized variant with improved engine, transmission, and fire control systems, extending the service life of older models into the 1970s. Up next, late Cold War. T-62. This 1961 tank introduced the world's first smoothbore gun on a mass-produced vehicle. The 115 mm 5TS gun was designed to fire high-velocity armor-piercing shells that could punch through 300 mm of armor at 1,000 meters. Over 20,000 were built and it remained a staple of Soviet-aligned armies for decades. Object 167. An experimental 1961 upgrade to the T-62, testing a new suspension system and a much more powerful 700 horsepower engine. While it performed exceptionally well in trials, Soviet military leadership decided to focus resources on more radical new designs like the T-64 instead. Object 432. T-64. A revolutionary 1963 design that changed armored warfare forever. It introduced composite armor combining steel and ceramics, an automatic loader allowing a smaller three-man crew, and advanced fire control. Weighing only 38 tons with a 115 mm smoothbore gun, it was far more advanced than any Western tank when it appeared. T-64A. The definitive 1967 version, bringing the massive 125 mm 2A46 smoothbore gun to the front lines. Combined with an improved automatic loader firing 8 rounds per minute, it set the lethality standard for Soviet main battle tanks for the remainder of the Cold War. Object 287. An experimental 1963 missile tank, built on a modernized chassis. It lacked a traditional gun and relied entirely on 9M15 guided missiles to engage enemies at long range. It proved the potential of missiles, but also highlighted the severe limitations of not having a conventional cannon for close combat. IT-1. A dedicated 1968 missile tank that saw limited service. It featured a pop-up launcher firing 3 M7 Drakon heavy-guided missiles at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. It was a specialized hunter designed to destroy NATO armor from safety before they could return fire, but only 220 were produced. Object 219. The 1963 experimental prototype used to test a powerful 1,000 horsepower gas turbine engine in a tank chassis. It was incredibly fast, reaching 70 kilometers per hour, and could start instantly in temperatures below -40 degrees. This research led directly to the birth of the T-80 main battle tank. T-72. Designed to be the reliable mass-produced workhorse of the Soviet Union entering service in 1973. Simpler and more cost-effective than the high-tech T-64. It featured a 125 mm gun and composite armor, while being easier to manufacture and maintain. It became one of the most widely used tanks in warfare history, with over 25,000 built in Russia alone. T-64B. The 1976 upgrade, adding the 9K112 Cobra gun-launched anti-tank missile system. This allowed engagement of targets beyond 4,000 meters, giving it superior range over NATO tanks of the period. Object 685. A highly advanced 1975 light tank designed specifically for airborne troops. Weighing only 18 tons, it was amphibious and carried a surprisingly powerful 100 mm gun. Though never produced, its design influenced several future vehicles, including the BEMP-3 infantry fighting vehicle. Object 934. Another 1976 airborne light tank contender, with very low weight of 14 tons and high top speed exceeding 70 kilometers per hour. It was built to be dropped from Il-76 cargo planes to provide immediate fire support for paratroopers. It was a sophisticated machine that refined the airborne tank concept. T-80. A high-performance main battle tank powered by a roaring 1,000 horsepower gas turbine engine entering service in 1976. Designed for rapid high-speed breakthroughs reaching 70 kilometers per hour, it was the elite choice for Soviet forces stationed in Eastern Europe during the final years of the Cold War. T-72A. The 1979 improved variant with better armor, improved fire control, and laser rangefinder. It became the most common variant exported to Soviet allies worldwide. T-64BV. The 1985 variant adding contact, one explosive reactive armor providing additional protection against shaped charge warheads. The ERA blocks could defeat anti-tank missiles and heat rounds. T-72B. The 1985 major upgrade featuring significantly improved frontal armor, 9K120 SWR gun-launched missiles, and contact, one reactive armor. It represented the peak of T-72 development during the Cold War. T-80B. The 1978 upgrade adding the gun-launched missile capability and improved fire control, making it one of the most capable tanks of its era. T-80B. The 1985 variant, with explosive reactive armor, dramatically improving protection against NATO anti-tank weapons. Object 477 Boxer. A radical 1985 experimental tank featuring an unmanned turret and an incredibly powerful 152 mm gun/launcher. It was intended to be a futuristic leap in design that could dominate any NATO tank on the modern battlefield, but the Soviet Union collapsed before it could enter production. Object 490. One of the most extreme tank designs ever proposed in 1984, featuring an unusual layout with the crew in the hull and ultra-high levels of protection exceeding 1,000 mm equivalent, it looked like something from science fiction. With its unique silhouette and advanced systems, only mock-ups were completed. Object 187. An advanced 1987 prototype meant to push the T-72 design to its absolute limit. It featured a redesigned hull, welded turret, and a much more powerful 200 horsepower engine. It was a highly capable tank demonstrating how much potential the T-72 chassis still possessed. T-80, the 1985 Ultimate Cold War evolution featuring Contact. 5 explosive reactive armor defeating NATO Sabot rounds. Improved 250 horsepower engine and advanced fire control. It represented the pinnacle of Soviet tank development. Object 292. This 1990 experimental beast was a T-80 chassis fitted with a massive 152 mm 2A83 gun. It was built to test if such a giant weapon could be effectively handled by a standard tank hull to counter new Western threats like M1A1 Abrams. T-72BU, the late 1980s variant that would become the basis for the T-90. It featured Contact, 5 reactive armor, and significantly improved fire control systems. Moving on to post-Soviet era. Object 299. More than just a tank, this was a 1990 project for a universal heavy platform. It was intended to be the base for everything from main battle tanks to engineering vehicles and heavy armored force. The Soviet collapse ended development. T-90, a successful 1992 blend of the battle-proven T-72 hull and the advanced electronic systems of the T-80, weighing 46 tons with a 125 mm gun and Contact, 5 armor. It became the primary tank for the Russian army throughout the 1990s and remains a highly popular export tank today. Object 640 Black Eagle, a striking 1999 prototype with a very long turret and external ammunition compartment separated from the crew. It was designed to keep the crew much safer by isolating propellant and projectiles in a bustle with blowout panels. Only mock-ups and a single prototype were completed before funding dried up. Object 195 T-95, a monster of a tank utilizing an unmanned turret and a giant 152 mm gun developed through the 2000s. It was meant to be the ultimate armored vehicle of the 21st century, with crew isolated in an armored capsule. Though not produced, its technology lives on in the T-14 Armata. T-90A, a 2004 upgraded version featuring a new welded turret replacing the cast turret and a more powerful 1000 horsepower engine. It included the Stora active protection system and advanced thermal sights, making it much more dangerous during night operations. 2S-25 Sprute SD, a unique 2005 airborne tank destroyer that can be dropped onto the battlefield by parachute. Weighing only 18 tons, it carries the same powerful 125 mm gun as a full-size tank, but on a much lighter chassis, giving VDV paratroopers the heavy firepower they desperately need. T-90S, the export variant with downgraded systems for international customers. It became commercially successful with sales to India, Algeria, and other nations. T-90M Prorif, the latest and most advanced version of the T-90 entering service in 2020. It features significantly improved modular armor, called Relict, a completely new welded turret design, 130 horsepower engine, and cutting-edge fire control. It is currently the most modern and capable tank in active Russian service. T-14 Armata. This represents a massive leap in modern armored design entering service in 2015. It features a fully unmanned turret, keeping the 3-man crew in a reinforced armored capsule in the hull for maximum safety. Weighing 55 tons with a 125 mm gun, with plans for 152 mm. It's packed with active protection systems, including the Afghanet hard kill system, intercepting incoming projectiles. T-72B3, the 2013 modernization program upgrading old T-72s with new fire control, improved engine, and better armor. Over 1,000 have been upgraded, extending the service life of the venerable design. T-72B3M, the 2016 further improved variant with a Relict explosive reactive armor, additional protection, and Sosna U gunner sight. It represents the ultimate evolution of the basic T-72 design. T-80BVM, the 2017 modernization of Cold War T-80s with Relict armor, improved engine reliability, modern fire control, and communication systems. It brings old gas turbine tanks to near-modern standards. T-90M Proriv 3, the absolute latest 2022 variant featuring even more improvements, including Relict explosive reactive armor, covering more of the vehicle, enhanced Kalina fire control system, and upgraded power plant. It represents the current pinnacle of the T-90 family. 2S-25M Sprut SDM-1, the modernized version of the airborne tank destroyer entering service in 2019. Featuring improved fire control systems, digital communications, and better automotive components, it remains one of the few vehicles in the world combining heavy tank firepower with the agility of an airborne platform. T-15 Armata, the heavy infantry fighting vehicle on the Armata chassis featuring the unmanned turret concept. Though not a tank, it shares the revolutionary design philosophy. T-16 Armata, the armored recovery vehicle variant of the Armata platform for battlefield vehicle recovery and repair.